In this series of lectures, we would like to discuss about the Consumer Protection Act. So, we divided certain questions and framed certain important questions relating to Consumer Protection Act. So, the first question that we would like to discuss is enumerate the salient features of the Consumer Protection Act. So, among the first one, that is the objects behind Consumer Protection Act. So, the very enactment of Consumer Protection Act, the objects are to provide for better protection interest of the consumer, to empower the consumer councils and other authorities to settle consumer disputes and matters connected therewith. So this applies to all goods and services unless specifically exempted by the central government. It covers all sectors, whether private, public, or cooperative. It confers certain rights on consumers. It envisages establishment of consumer protection councils at the central and state levels whose main object shall be to promote and protect the rights of the consumer. So, we would like to discuss certain provisions under Section 2 of the Act, which defines exactly about a consumer. So, consumer means a person who buys any goods for a consideration which has been paid or promised, partly paid and partly promised, or under any system of deferred payment in respect of hire purchase transactions. The term includes any other user of such goods when such use is made with the approval of the buyer. A person who hires or avail of any services for consideration which has been paid or promised or partly paid and partly promised or under any system of deferred payment. Any economic activity or transaction carried on with the motive of making profit would fall under the term commercial purpose, irrespective of the scale of operation. So, in that context, we would like to discuss certain important leading cases that we frame in the light of such cases. As examples, so we would like to discuss such cases in the form of examples such as the first one. Mr. Jagdish Poswal applied for registration of a gas connection with Mahindra Gas Enterprises. He was not given the gas connection for quite some time. He filed a complaint for deficiency of service on part of the Mahindra Gas Enterprises. The gas dealer contended that Mr. Paswal was not a consumer as the registration for gas connection does not amount to hiring of services. The National Commission held that the contention of the gas dealer was not correct. According to the definition of consumer, it is not necessary that consideration should be paid at the time of hiring of service. If the transaction is supported by consideration which has been paid or promised or partly paid or partly promised or under any system of deferred payment, even then it will be a valid consideration for the hiring of services. So, in the present case, the payment of what consideration was deferred till the gas connection was released. Thus, Mr. Possible was very much a consumer. And now we would like to discuss another leading case in example form, that is Signet Corporation filed a complaint against the Municipal Corporation of Delhi for failure to maintain a public drain properly. The National Commission held that no complaint under the Act could be maintained against the Municipal Corporation on the ground of alleged failure to discharge its statutory duty of proper maintenance of a public drain. The construction, maintenance, and cleaning of drain and drainage works and removal and disposal of filth, rubbish, and other polluted matters were works which the corporation was required to undertake and carry out in discharge of its statutory obligation. This was not a work to be performed by the corporation under an arrangement of hiring of services for consideration entered into between it and any private party. It further held that the payment of tax levied in exercise of sovereign function of the state could not constitute consideration even remotely as quid pro quo for any service rendered or likely to be rendered. And now we would like to discuss another important leading case. And in the example form, that is Dr. D.C. Gupta, a medical practitioner, purchased an ultrasound scanner. It stopped functioning within a short period of time. He went to return the equipment to the supplier. The supplier refused to take it back. Then Dr. Gupta made a complaint to the National Commission. The supplier pleaded that the complaint was not a consumer in the scanner was purchased for the purpose of his professional work and that he was making profit out of it. But Dr. Gupta claimed that it was being used by his personal skill and to earn his livelihood. The National Commission observed the question of profit was not relevant. The question to be seen as whether the goods purchased by Dr. Gupta was being used by himself. The supplier had not laid any evidence to the fact that Dr. Gupta was not personally using the scanner. On the other hand, from the affidavit of Dr. Gupta, it was clear that the scanner was used by him by his personal skill for earning his livelihood. Hence, Dr. Gupta was a consumer. The supplier was directed to refund its price. So, in that connection, now we would like to discuss another important concept under Consumer Act, which is being defined under Section 2, subsection 1 and subclass C, and that is relating to consumer dispute. So it means when the person against whom a complaint has been made denies or disputes the allegations contained in the complaint and would be called a consumer disputes. And the very defect in regards to consumer goods and services is defined under Section 2, subsection 1, clause F. A defect is defined to mean any fault, imperfection, or shortcoming in the quality, quantity, potency, purity, or standard which is required to be maintained by or under any law for the time being in force or under any contract, express or implied, or as is claimed by the trader in any manner whatsoever in relation to any goods. And while discussing this, we would like to discuss what exactly deficiency means. Parallel to defect in case of goods, deficiency is relevant in case of services. Accordingly, it is defined to mean by any fault, imperfection, shortcoming, or inadequacy in the quality, nature, and manner of performance which is required to be maintained by or under any law for the time being in force or has been undertaken to be performed by a person in pursuance of a contract or otherwise in relation to any service. So, in that connection, we would like to discuss about the leading case, and that is consumer utility and trust society versus state of Rajasthan in 1989. So, in that connection, what is exactly called goods or manufacturer or services? So, in that regard, we would like to discuss what exactly goods means, as under this act shall have the same meaning as assigned to them under the Sale of Goods Act 1930. Accordingly, goods means every kind of movable property other than actionable claims and money, and includes stock and shares, growing crops, grass, and things attached to or forming part of the land which are agreed to be severed before sale or under the contract of sale as it is being defined under section 2 subsection 7 of the Sale of Goods Act 1930. And in that connection, we would like to define who is a manufacturer. So the very expression manufacturer for the purpose of this act means any of the persons who makes or manufactures any goods or parts thereof, or person who does not make or manufacture any goods but assembles parts thereof, made or manufactured by others. But where a manufacturer dispatches any goods or parts thereof to any branch office maintained by him, such branch office shall not be deemed to be manufacturer even though the parts so dispatched to it if are assembled at such branch office and are sold or distributed from such branch office. Also, a person who puts or causes to be put his own mark or any goods made or manufactured by any other manufacturers. So, in that connection, we would like to discuss that very important leading case, and that is consumer unity and trust society versus state of Rajasthan, which was decided in 1989. So, in that connection, a controversy has been raised with regard to treatment at government hospitals as to whether it constitutes a service within the meaning of service of the Act. There are some who believe that treatment in government hospitals is actually not free in as much as it is the taxpayers' money which goes to fund these hospitals, and if therefore a taxpayer seeks the treatment is paying for the same, though indirectly. However, National Commission in this important leading case held that complaints against government hospitals cannot be entertained under the Act on the ground that a person receiving treatment in such hospitals is not a consumer as the patient does not have the services of the hospitals. Moreover, the treatment provided is free of charge and therefore it does not amount to service. It further urged that this was their interpretation within the scope of the Act, and if the legislature intended otherwise, the Act ought to be amended suitably. And in that connection, we would like to discuss another important leading case, and that is Cosmopolitan Hospitals versus Srimati Basanta P. Nair in 1992. It was held that, however, service rendered by doctors in private hospitals for consideration would come under the purview of service as defined under the Consumer Protection Act. And in that connection, we would like to discuss some examples such as Maina Devi's husband took a life insurance policy for Rs 50,000 before the second premium fell due. He died due to sudden illness. The claim made by her was not important for as long as 14 years. It was only when she got her measure is published in newspapers and certain parliament members took up the matter in parliament that she was sent a check for Rs 50,310 rupees. She made a complaint to the National Commission for Deficiency of Service by Life Insurance Corporation of India. The National Commission held that the corporation had been highly negligent in performance of its services. Manadevi, the complainant, had suffered loss on account of deficiency in service. She was held entitled to interest at 12% per annum from the date of expiry of 3 months from the date of death of the assured till the amount was paid to her. The Commission also awarded her compensation of Rs 50,000 for mental torture and harassment. And now we would like to discuss another important example relating to consumer protection, that is Anupama Bagla complained that she lost admission to the desired college on account of non-delivery of documents by the courier to the college. Her hardship caused by reason of the courier losing documents and thus depriving Anupama the admission. The National Commission upheld an award of Rs 10,000. This act of the courier was held to the deficiency in service as per the provisions of the Consumer Protection Act. Now we would like to discuss another important example from a leading case. Rupkishar Tandon was not given the possession of a flat even after the Lucknow Development Authority received the payment and registered it in his favor. This was held to be a deficiency of service. And I would like to discuss another example from another important leading case, such as a gas cylinder with a defective valve was supplied to a customer. Also, the gas distributor supply persons failed to check the defect at the time of delivery. Fire was caused by the leakage of the gas from the defective valve and there was a loss of life. The gas company was liable to compensate for loss of life due to the deficiency in service. And now we would like to discuss another example that we have framed from the leading case, and that is a demand draft of Rs 98,000 was issued by the State Bank of Travancore on the State Bank of India, Surat. When the draft was presented for payment at the Droy branch, the payment was refused on the ground that under the signature of one of the persons signing the draft accountant The capacity in which he signed the same was not mentioned. The refusal of payment on this ground was held to be deficiency in service. The bank was held liable for the inconvenience and consequent loss to the way for the debt. And now we will discuss another important example that we have framed from a leading case relating to deficiency in service, and that is Mr. S.P. Dhavaskar booked a house with the Karnataka Housing Board against a deposit of Rs 1.66 lakhs. After 5 years, the Housing Board informed him that the construction of the houses was not up to the expected level and therefore he could either take back the amount of deposited without interest or opt for a new house. He filed a complaint and the Commission held that the act of the Housing Board amounted to deficiency in service and returning the deposit amount without interest was unreasonable and ordered payment of interest at 18% per annum. The argument of the Housing Board that under the rules and regulations the allottees were not entitled to interest was struck down by the National Commission. And now we would like to discuss another example. A patient was under the treatment of a doctor in a nursing home. The doctor left station without making competent alternative arrangements to attend to serious cases. An unqualified person working as compounder administered medicine which resulted in the death of the patient. The doctor was held liable for deficiency of service. And another important example from a leading case that we framed is Mr. H.P. Gupta received a notice from Delhi Municipal Corporation demanding areas of house tax. He wrote several letters that no areas were due from him. There was no response to his letter. Instead, another bill was received by him, and to the objections raised by him, there was no response. The corporation directed Mr. Gupta's bank to freeze his account. Accordingly, the bank froze his account. Mr. Gupta made a complaint under the Consumer Protection Act despite several notices and several adjournments. No nominee of the corporation appeared before the State Commission. So it was held to be a case of deficiency in service and awarded as 5,000 as damages. So now we would like to discuss certain important other provisions as under the Consumer Protection Act, and one is relating to the very term complaint, and in that connection we would like to discuss in particularly a complaint means any of the persons such as a consumer, any voluntary consumer association registered under the Companies Act 1956 or under any other law for the time being in force, the central government or any state government or one or more consumers where there are numerous consumers having the same interest, and in case of death of the consumer his legal heir or representative. And another term which is being defined under the Consumer Protection Act is complainant. So complainant here exactly means any allegation in writing made by a complainant with a view to obtaining any relief under the Act. So, what exactly complaint means? Any unfair trade practice or restrictive trade practice has been adopted by any trader or service provider, and the complainant has suffered loss or damage, and complaint otherwise means the goods bought by him or agreed to be bought by him suffer from defects in any respect. And another meaning of complaint means the services hired or availed of or agreed to be had or availed of by him suffer from deficiency in any respect. So, complaint otherwise means a trader or the service provider, as the case may be, has charged for the goods or for the services mentioned in the complaint a price in excess of the price fixed by or under any law for the time being in force displaced on the goods or any package containing such goods displaced on the price list exhibited by him by or under any law for the time being in force. So also the agreed between the parties. Besides that, complaint means also goods which will be hazardous to life and safety when used or being offered for sale to the public in contravention of any standards relating to safety of such goods as required to be complied with or by under any law for the time being in force, or if the trader could have known with due diligence that the goods so offered are unsafe to the public. So now in that connection, would like to discuss some important leading case, and that is manager milk chilling center versus Mahbub Nagar Citizens Council 1990. So when the price of any article is not fixed by any law or displaced on the goods or the package containing them, the Act does not contemplate any complaint being instituted in respect of the price charged on the ground that such price is excessive as it was held by the Commission. And now we would like to discuss another important aspects relating to Consumer Protection Act, and that is unfair trade practice. So, unfair trade practice exactly means as it is defined under the Act, trade practice which for the purpose of promoting the sale, use or supply of any goods or for the provisions of any service adopts any unfair method or unfair or deceptive practice, including any of the practices such as misleading advertisements and false representation, the very practice of making any statement, whether orally or in writing, or by visible representation, which falsely represents that the goods are of a particular standard, quality, quantity, grade, composition, style, or method, or falsely represents that the services are of a particular standard, quality, or grade, or if falsely represents any rebuilt, second hand, renovated, reconditions, or old goods, or as new goods, or when it represents that the goods services have sponsorship, approval, performance, characteristics, accessories, use or benefits which such goods or services do not have, or when represents that the seller or the supplier has a sponsorship or approval or affiliation with such seller or supplier does not have. Also, when makes a false or misleading representation concerning the need for or the usefulness of any goods or services. Besides that, whenever gives to the public any warranty or guarantee of the performance, efficiency, or length of life of a product or of any good that is not based on an adequate or proper test thereof. So, these are all falling under unfair trade practices. And now we would like to discuss another important unfair trade practices as it is relating to bargain sale. So, the publication of any advertisement, whether in any newspaper or otherwise, for the sale of supply of at a bargain price of goods and services that are not intended to be offered for sale or supply at the bargain price or for period, that is, and in quantities that are reasonable, having regard to the nature of the market and size of business and the nature of the advertisement, and falling under unfair trade practices. And now we will discuss another form of unfair trade practices, offering gifts, prizes, etc. So, the offerings of gifts, prizes, or other items with an intention of not providing them as offered or creating impression that something is being given or awarded free of charge when it is fully or partly covered by the amount charged in the transaction as a whole would be considered as unfair trade practices. And the very Amendment Act of 2002 relating to the Consumer Protection Act of 1986 provided that withholding of information about final results of schemes offering gifts is another form of unfair trade practices. And also, whenever anything is not conforming to the prescribed standard would fall under unfair trade practices, such as the sale or supply of goods intended to be used or are of a kind likely to be used by the consumers knowingly or having reason to believe that the goods do not comply with the standards prescribed by the competent authority relating to performance, composition, contents, design, construction, finishing, or packaging as are necessary to prevent or reduce the risk of injury to the person using the goods. The sale of helmets without ASI certification will amount to an unfair trade practices under this very clause. So also, we would like to discuss another form of unfair trade practices is manufacture of spurious goods such as the Amendment Act of 2002 relating to the original Consumer Protection Act of 1986 has widened the scope of the act by including the manufacture of spurious goods or offering such goods for sale or adopting descriptive practices in the provisions of service as unfair trade practice. And finally, we would like to discuss another important part and is kind of salient features of the Consumer Protection Act, and that is relating to rights of consumers. So, the very act originally under the Consumer Protection of 1986 provides that one is right to safety, the right to be protected against the marketing of goods and services which are hazardous to life and property. And the second right is right to be informed. The right to be informed about the quality, quantity, potency, purity, standard, and price of goods or services, as the case may be, so as to protect the consumer against unfair trade practices. And the third important right is right to choose. It means right to be assured wherever possible access to a variety of goods and services at competitive prices in case of monopolies, say, such as railways, telephones, etc. It means right to be assured of satisfactory quality and service at a fair price. And the fourth important right of the consumer as per the Acts of 1986, right to be had. The consumer's interest will receive due consideration at appropriate forums. It also includes right to be represented in various forums formed to consider the consumer's welfare. And the next important right of the consumer is right to seek redressal. It means the right to seek redressal against unfair practices or restrictive trade practices or exploitation of consumers. It also includes right to fair settlement of the genuine grievances of the consumer. And the next important right of the consumer is relating to right to consumer education. It means the right to acquire the knowledge and skill to be an informed consumer. So these are the important rights of a consumer as we found under the provisions of the Consumer Protection Act of 1986, which was subsequently amended in 2019, and the very Act of 2019, although replaced the Consumer Protection of 1986, but it only includes certain new provisions relating to e-commerce or online transaction of goods and services. So, in this particular question, which should be considered most important as relating to enumerating the salient features of the Consumer Protection Act, first we have discussed regarding the very objects of the Consumer Protection Act regarding protection of interest of consumers and all goods and services falling under Consumer Protection Act, and whether the parties relate to private, public or cooperative, and also regarding consumer protection councils and consumer disputes and how consumer is being defined and consumer disputes, and also regarding the definition meaning of goods manufacture service. And in that connection we have discussed certain important leading cases such as Consumer Unity and Trust Society versus State of Rajasthan. The case was decided by the National Commission in 1989, and another important leading case, Cosmopolitan Hospital versus Srimati Basanta P. Nair in 1992. And we have discussed almost a number of leading cases that we have framed in the form of examples. And besides that, also we have discussed what exactly complaint means and who is a complainant. And in that connection, we have discussed another important leading case, that is manager milk chilling center versus Mahbub Nagar Citizens Council, which was decided in 1990. Besides that, in length we have discussed what exactly unfair trade practice means and how it constitutes the very violation of the provisions of Consumer Protection Act, and under that we have discussed misleading advertisement and false representation, bargain sale offering gifts, prizes, etc., which were considered as unfair trade practices under an Amendment Act of 2002, and another form that not conforming to prescribed standards. So almost we have discussed and defined what exactly unfair trade practices means, and finally we have discussed the various rights of consumers which are enumerated under the Consumer Protection of 1986, which was substantially amended and replaced under the Consumer Protection Act of 2019.